Welcome to Define, the podcast about the moments that shape us. I'm your host, Maddie, life coach, yoga teacher, and curious soul. Each episode, I speak to someone about a defining moment in their life, the kind that flipped their world upside down, cracked them open, and led them on a journey they never expected. This isn't about headlines or hero stories. It's about real life, real shifts, and what it takes to rebuild after the break. So let's get into it. Hi, Jane. Welcome to Define. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Oh, great to hear. We're meeting on a very sunny Friday afternoon, which is always
Sunny and finally warm soon.
yeah, helps bring in the weekend.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so grateful and so pleased to have you here. We've just been talking kind of off recording about this being kind of a newer space for both of us. So I'm so pleased that we're able to come together and kind of facilitate this conversation. And I would love it if we could just start by, in your own words, you introducing yourself and what it is you do and who you are.
Okay, so I'm Jane Johnson and I currently run Bright Futures Coaching, which is a teen mindset and confidence coaching business with a focus on helping teens to overcome exam anxiety, low self-esteem. And I also work with families to help rebuild connection, because parenting teens is quite hard and a lot of parents find that quite difficult. So there's kind of two sides to that journey. Prior to starting my business, I was a teacher for 27 years, so I have a lot of experience in working with teens. But for me, the origin of my business came out of a devastating loss, which was my teenage son who died by suicide in 2023. And it came as a complete shock to not just me, but his closest friends. None of us knew the extent of his pain and how deeply he was suffering. Even though he had actually been quite open about struggling with depression, we just had no idea the depths of that. So my business and my company is born out of that grief, really. And my mission is to help families kind of build open, trusting relationships and give teens a safe space to share their emotions, to share their feelings, especially when they're struggling, which I think a lot of teens find hard.
Yeah, thank you. And just such essential work that you do. And that's why I was so pleased that you agreed to come on here and talk about the work that you do. And I don't know if I live in some echo chamber of coaches who only coach adults, but I think that coaching teens, like coaching, future generations, is such important work. And I hope throughout this episode we can hear more about what that's like. But obviously you've mentioned there's a huge devastating loss in your life is what led you into this space. And, this is a defining moment for you. So I wondered if we take a step backwards and think a little bit about kind of what life was like before. You said you were a teacher. Are you happy to share a bit more about, life before that defining moment?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, life before was kind of very normal, very pedestrian, very kind of, I was divorced from my children's dad, but I have a new partner, two fabulous children. We'd kind of coped through lockdown and seemingly coped very well through lockdown. I was teaching for a long time, and I think there were elements that I loved, elements that I didn't love. And I think I was very aware of how much time teaching took of my life. But I also felt like I'd managed to get a bit of a balance. And obviously having school holidays is a big bonus when you've got children. You can spend time with the children. But I was already thinking of leaving teaching because I think I'd reached a point where there were elements that I enjoyed, but there were starting to be more elements that I didn't enjoy. I was head of department. I teach French and Spanish. It's a lot. Teaching is an all-encompassing career. And I think I was starting to be aware of all the things that I might have been missing out on. So although I did get to spend time with the children, I think there were certain things that I did feel I was missing out on. And especially, I mean, during lockdown, both of my children were going through exams. So Leo was going through A levels and Ella was going through GCSEs.
Mm.
And I think having that time through lockdown to spend kind of together as a family, even though a lot of it we spent in different rooms doing our respective jobs and Leonella doing their respective lessons. And I think we did still have a lot of time to spend together as a family, which was obviously forced on us. It was forced on everybody. But I think it was a positive. I think it was quite a positive for us as a family, and it did allow us to spend quite a lot of time together. And so after lockdown, I did start really thinking about whether teaching was right for me or not. So that thinking of leaving teaching was already there. And interestingly, I'd actually started training as a coach as well, but a coach for adults. So I'd started as part of my role in school, I'd started training as a coach for teachers. And I'd done a couple of qualifications in that arena. So I think the lead up, obviously, it came totally out of the blue. There wasn't even on our radar that it was even a possibility. And I do remember, and I think I mentioned this to you in one of our conversations, I do remember seeing things on the news and just thinking, gosh, how lucky I am and how lucky we are as a family that nothing devastating like that has happened.
Mm.
And that included my extended family. I've got quite a big extended family and cousins, and they've all got children of a similar age, and we used to do holidays together. So, and it's not just with hindsight. I think I genuinely felt very lucky. I genuinely felt like I had a really good life in the before.
Mm. I think that's so important as well, of that verbalizing that unexpectedness of it. Many of us, anyone who's been affected by suicide, is often we don't know. Often there aren't signs, and that, we can feel in a really lucky space, and then suddenly when we are affected, it's hugely shocking.
Yeah, that really struck me as quite a kind of juxtaposition that nothing serious had ever really happened in our family. Nothing devastating. We'd obviously had, like, my grandparents have all passed away, but they were all in their 90s, which is incredible. And I do have a very forward thinking, positive family who, so I was surrounded very much by positivity and a lot of joy, really. So yeah, I did genuinely feel very fortunate, very
Mm.
lucky.
And I'm curious to hear, you said during the pandemic, you were still teaching, and then you were starting to kind of get this intrigue into coaching. And I'm wondering, what was it about coaching that drew you in?
I think for me, I'm a natural helper. And I think I always laugh and say, I don't know whether my personality led me into teaching or teaching became my personality. The two kind of merged over the years. And the thing I loved most about teaching was that one to one, that ability to help, to guide. And I'd done a little bit of work in teacher training, and I really enjoyed that. And the coaching seemed like a natural progression from that. And it was actually through school that I was offered the opportunity to do a coaching qualification. We were actually all given coaching. We were all of the middle leaders. I think I do work very forward thinking school, because I do still work in schools, and I still work in the school that I was at previously. So my school is quite forward thinking. The head had organised for all of the middle leaders to have 3 sessions of what they call pure coaching. And I just found it absolutely revolutionary, really. It opened my eyes to so much, and it was really freeing. And I found it so useful to have a space to talk and then to kind of find my own solutions. And so from that, we were then asked if any of us would like to then carry on and train as coaches. So it's kind of like a little filter through. And so we had to write some feedback and put together a proposal as to why we wanted to do it. And I was just like, well, I felt like I'd found something really special in coaching. So I put myself forward, and then I was lucky enough to get chosen. So there were 2 of us who went forward to do the training. And then I was working in school as a coach.
Amazing.
So I think it came from me, from a professional point of view. It was something that I enjoyed. And then having experienced it, I was just like, wow, I need to do this. I need to share this with other people. So yeah, that's how I got into
Mm.
coaching, really.
Incredible. And as you say, what like a brilliant school and forward thinking to provide that type of support to their employees. And one thing you were saying, which resonates with me, but I think with a lot of people, is sometimes we need to go through and experience something like being coached ourselves to then and feel that, actual impact and see it at work itself. And then suddenly it switches something in the brain. And it's amazing to see that it had that impact, and that your employer was so supportive of you to then go on and train and do that.
Yeah, and I think, it is very much that thing, isn't it? It's because I'd experienced it, I found it so much easier to tell other people what it was that I was doing and what it was that I was aiming for, because I'd been on the receiving end of it and benefited from it massively in terms of not just professional, but also personal life, because it was set up as a safe space. So although it was through school and school paid for it, they had no input whatsoever. So it was very much a safe space. They got no feedback. It was set up wholly confidentially, and it was just between you and your coach. And I've actually kept in touch with my coach since, and we've had a couple of sessions since, because we've built that relationship. And I think the strength of relationships in coaching is just so
Yeah,
important.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so if we kind of jump into a timeline, so you're, still working in school, training as a coach, kind of at home, because of the pandemic, I wonder if you'd be happy to take us towards that defining moment. And we don't need to linger there any longer than feels right for you, but I'm wondering if you are happy to share.
Yeah, it's such a massive part of my journey. And I genuinely wouldn't be where I am now if all of this hadn't happened. I think I would possibly still be teaching. So, yeah, it's a real massive part of who I am and where I am now. So, we came out of the pandemic. Leo had done his A levels during the pandemic. So, he'd literally spent most of his sixth form year from age 17 through to 18 in lockdown, which I think, with hindsight, those are the years where you start to experiment. Those are the years where you start to go out and, try things, but with the safety of your parents still around and the safety of your
Mm.
hometown. Obviously I've done a lot of soul searching and looking back. And I think that was quite a big thing, that he missed out on those really kind of defining years and those experimental years. But as we came out of the pandemic, he was successful in his A levels. He decided he wanted to go to university. He had decided what course he wanted to do. So for his 16th birthday, he'd asked for a diving course. So he was quite an
Mm.
adventurous little soul, not a traditional like football, rugby, anything like that, but anything adventurous. He wanted to try it. So he had a diving course for his 16th birthday and then just went from strength to strength in diving. He absolutely loved it. And his subjects at school for his A-level subjects were physics, geography, geology. So the diving kind of, his physicsy, sciencey kind of brain just fitted really well with the diving. And he loved the theory part of it as well. So he decided he wanted to do oceanography at
Amazing.
university,
Yeah.
which was like, wow, just fascinating, which meant he was looking at universities by the sea, which also meant, with us living in the West Midlands, they were all quite far, quite a long way away. And again, he didn't get that traditional, open days and things like that. We did end up driving to a couple to have a look. So I remember driving to Plymouth and back
Oh, wow.
in
That
one
is
day to go
like, if anyone's
test the
international
sea.
listening, that's crossing most of England.
Quite far. It's a good 3-4 hour
Mm.
journey each way, which I think to some Americans and Australians probably isn't very far at all. But to us in the UK, that's quite a long way. But yeah, we went down and we had a really lovely day. And I do treasure those moments that we had together. And as it turned out, Plymouth was his first choice and his second and third choice. I think he applied to 3 courses all at
He
Plymouth
just
because he
knew that
loved it
that
so
was
much.
that's where he wanted to be. Yeah.
Yeah, and he got in, which was great. So he started at university. One of the things I do look back to, and it has been part of it was part of my light bulb moment, was that I couldn't take him on his first day of uni because I was teaching. So he started on a Thursday. I don't know why he started on a Thursday, but he started on a Thursday, and I couldn't take him because I was teaching. So I wasn't able to go down until that weekend. But we went down and we spent a lovely weekend down there, kind of helped him settle into his room. But from there on, I think after the divorce, so Leo was about 11 when me and his dad got divorced. And I think he found it easier just to keep his life with his dad and his life with me kind of separate. I'd like to say we had an amicable relationship. We didn't really. In reality, it was not that amicable and it was tough. And again, one of those things with hindsight, I can now see it a little bit more through Leo's eyes. But at the time, obviously, it was through my eyes. And so he kept those two parts of his life separate. And then I think when he went to university, that was him, that was his new life. And to some extent, he also kept that part of his life separate as well. So we heard a few things, and he'd send me like snippets, and he'd send me photos, and he'd send me amazing photos of like lectures on
Mm.
boats out in the Plymouth Sound and diving expedition.
It's incredible. Not your traditional sort of university experience, is it?
Not at all, not at all. I do remember he sent me a video one morning, very early. Well, I say very early. It seemed like early for a student. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and he was walking down Plymouth Harbour because the diving course had lectures in the boathouse. So he was walking down Plymouth Harbour to go to the boathouse, and then the view from his lecture theatre, the boathouse, was just the ocean, and it was just incredible. And I remember thinking, wow, how amazing, and how well has he done, and just feeling so proud of what he'd achieved and where he was. He finished his first year. He seemed to be living his absolute best life. I remember him coming back and in the summer and just saying to me, boring here. I want to be back at uni. And I can totally see why. Who would want to be stuck in a house in the West Midlands, in a small town in the West Midlands, when you've come from living by the sea and diving and going out on boats? And so I can totally understood it. And he spent that summer after his first year, he spent the summer doing all sorts of crazy things, as only Leo does. One Friday, he said to me, he said, I think I'm going to go to France. I said, okay. 2 days later, him and his friends went to France. So he was quite impulsive like that, but, very much an adventurous soul. And he'd got a group of friends, both at home and at uni, who enjoyed a bit of an adventure and were very active. So he was always quite an active soul. And I remember like he borrowed my paddleboard to go down on the canal. And I just remember thinking like the worst thing that could happen is that he might fall in and swallow some water. That was,
Just seems so, like, free-spirited.
but yeah,
That's,
he
like,
was,
the phrase that's coming up in my mind. Just so
yeah, free spirited, a little bit of a thrill seeker, loved a bit of an adventure. I was very proud of him for that, because that's the kind of child you want. You want a child who's going to be independent and kind of, not afraid to try things and just go for it, really. But he was also bright, funny. He had a really lovely group of friends here, a lovely group of friends at uni. And then he went back for his second year, and he went back earlier than his friends because he was doing a professional diving qualification. So he went back in September and did the diving qualification in September. So he then passed that. So he got a professional diving qualification, which effectively meant that he could later on become a commercial diver, which was one of his dreams. But then in the November, he told us that he'd been diagnosed with mild depression, and he came home for a little bit, and he was very open with us. He told us he'd been struggling. He told us he didn't really know where it had come from, but he just felt really low and really down. And we could see that he was trying lots of things to try and get better. He was very open with his friends. He told his friends that he'd been diagnosed. He was put onto antidepressants, sertraline. But then after about a week at home, he did decide to go back to uni. We did give him the option, both me and his dad gave him the option to stay at home if he wanted to, but I think he felt he wanted to go back. And then he came home again at Christmas. And after Christmas, he was quite reticent to go back. And I remember having a discussion with him about his options, and that actually he didn't have to go back if he didn't want to. And I'd like to think we didn't pressure him, but maybe he felt a pressure to go back and finish, or maybe he put that pressure on himself. I don't know, but he did decide to go back. And so he went back sort of mid-January and then came home again for a week, which again, I look back and this was a bit of a catalytic moment, in that he came home on the Tuesday. On the Tuesday, he went out with friends in the evening. On the Wednesday, I had parents' evening, so didn't have time I was teaching during the week and didn't have time to spend with him on the Wednesday evening because I had parents' evening. And on the Thursday, Thursday he went to his dad's for dinner. And then on the Friday, whilst I was at work, he left to go back to uni. And I remember FaceTiming him on the Saturday, and he just looked really low, really, really low. And I probably should have listened to my instinct a little bit better, but I didn't. And then a week later, no, having had a couple of messages from him in the week, because I did keep in touch with him via text. He was much better on text than he was by phone. I kept in touch with him by text, and the last text he sent me, I'd asked him how he was, and he said, I'm feeling really good. He sent me a picture of the sea. It looked beautiful. He said, been swimming here this morning, feeling better than I have done in ages. Think I'm going to swim every day in February. And then the following morning, we got a knock on the door, 4 a.m, from the police, because Leo had, I don't want to trigger anyone, but he died on the railway. And I remember thinking, well, surely there's some mistake. How do you know it's Leo? What, you're from Birmingham Transport Police, but Leo's in Plymouth. And I remember saying, but Leo's in Plymouth. And they said, yes, the incident happened in Plymouth. And I just kept saying, how do you know it's him? And they said he had his driving licence on him. So, yeah, we'll never fully understand why. And obviously there's so many questions. I think there's so many questions with suicide. You'll never fully know the why. And I think it's taken me a long time to come to terms with that we will never fully understand why that night, why then, why he couldn't tell anybody, why he couldn't share how he was feeling at those absolute depths, and why he felt that was his only way out. So many whys. And he'd actually been out with friends that night as well. He'd actually been out, and they all said how much more upbeat he seemed and how happy he seemed. And several of them had commented to him that he seemed really happy. And apparently, as he left the pub, he said, see you, everyone. I love you all. And this was a 19-year-old boy to his friends. So I do think there was an element of decision made and choice there. I do strongly believe that, which bizarrely, I've actually found quite comforting, that this was his decision and his choice. And I've reflected quite a lot. And I do think if somebody else had taken his life, I'd have found that even harder. Whereas this was his choice, this was his decision. And although we'll never fully understand why, and I'll never know whether we could have done things differently for a different outcome, that's a question that will never be answered. I hold on to the fact that this was his choice, and the toxicology report came back. There was no alcohol, no drugs in his system. So it was whilst obviously mental health played a part, there was nothing that influenced his mental state apart from his own mental health.
And first, I just want to thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing your story, because I think we spoke a little bit before we recorded about how important it is, and getting that story out there and starting to talk about it, not only for your own journey, but I sense in the way that it can spread awareness and maybe support other people too.
Still have been the same. And I've done a lot of soul searching. I've done a lot of reflecting. I've had counselling. And I think through my own journey as a coach has helped me reflect. I think there's a lot tied up with the death of a child anyway, because it's just the wrong order. It's not the way it should happen, particularly someone so young. I think to some extent, parents and grandparents dying is sad. And I think there is grief attached to it. Of course there is. But you do expect at some point in your lifetime that your grandparents and your parents will pass
Mhm.
away before
Mhm.
you. You don't expect your child to pass away before you. So I think it does bring a different element. And then I think suicide on top of that brings that extra layer of complexity that really requires you to kind of dig quite deep and do quite a lot of soul searching to be able to move forward from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can there's without a shadow of a doubt, this defining moment will have impacted kind of every corner of your life. And I'm wondering, or I'm more curious to hear about kind of the ripple effects that this then had on your life and those around Leo.
It was massive. It was absolutely massive. For me, it really led me to question what I was doing with my life and how I was spending my time, and all of those things about not being able to take Leo to university. And the last week he was home, I'd had to go to parents' evening. All of those things they made me realize how much I'd given up for my job. And much as it was a valuable job to do, and most of the time I did love it, but it had taken obviously quite a lot away from me. So that was the one part of it. And I think it did make me realize that leaving teaching was the right thing to do, although I didn't do it straight away, because obviously I realized I needed some stability and I needed to kind of
Mm.
work through the grief before making any massive changes. And fortunately, again, my school were incredible and the support I got was absolutely amazing. They allowed me to go back on a phased return, and that gave me some breathing space. That gave me some space to really think about what I wanted to do. But the other thing that happened was that his friends became our friends, and they were such a massive source of support. And I realized that teenagers, as whilst, there's a lot of negativity about teenagers, his friends were just incredible. And they had a very different view of grief to most of the adults. And I say adults, a lot of his friends are kind of, they were 19, 20. So I suppose that adults, but to
Mm.
me, they were children, because that's the age my son was. And it was so refreshing to be around people who, they were grieving. And obviously, they found it incredibly hard, but it wasn't a kind of woe is me, life has to stop, everything's horrendous. They very much turned it into their purpose. And his friends at university organised so many events and included us. And I made sure that I included them in anything that we organised as well. So we had the funeral, which we thought was going to be quite small, but turned out to be a lot bigger. And then we had a memorial event, and there were literally like hundreds of people who came. And then in the evening, Leo's sister Ella, Leo loved dance music, he loved clubbing, he loved raves, and they organised a rave in the evening. So the whole day of the memorial was about Leo, his friends, the different parts of his life. His friends spoke at the memorial and brought humour, and the various activities that Leo had done spoke as well. And then there were people who said, "Oh, I've got a song, I'd really like to sing a song." My brother came, he'd written a song, and he came and did a song. And it was in the midst of all that grief, the people around me managed to make it uplifting. And it was just such an incredible experience. So that event in itself, the memorial, was just an incredibly
Mm.
uplifting experience.
Sounds like such a celebration of life. And it reminds me when you were talking about how Leo did have different parts of himself and different parts of his life. And it feels like such a acknowledgement of that, of all the different parts of him. And it really brought a smile to my face thinking about the fact that you've gained all these wonderful friends and they've kind of gained you and your family as well. And that idea of coming together to kind of heal as one, leaning on each other.
Yeah. And I think in such a positive way as well. It just was really refreshing the way that his friends dealt with it. I think as adults, we can get bogged down in the thought that grief has to be sad, but grief can also be a celebration of life, and it can bring people together, and it can be in some ways uplifting, the memories. And I mean, some of the stories they told us were just brilliant and so heartwarming, and elements of Leo that I just didn't know that, I've since found out about. And I think that's another thing that I've reflected on, is there are so many parts of Leo that I didn't know and that, I've learned about since, some of which he probably wouldn't have wanted me to learn about through this. I think I do try and take the positives. I mean, obviously, there is no positive to the fact that we've lost Leo, but I think taking this forward in a positive way has helped me grieve. And I hesitate to use the word recover, because I'm not sure it's not really a recovery. I don't know what the word is, but it's a kind of moving forward. It's helped me move forward. And I do think it was partly their insight, the insight of the young people and the way they dealt with it, that really helped me to galvanize my grief and turn it into something positive and turn it into something that would help
So this is
others.
where the dots start to connect. So that galvanizing of the grief, is that what sort of led you into the work that you are doing now?
Do you know what? I think it's one of those things where there were lots of little moments of serendipity that just kind of came together. So I think just having the support of all those people, and my own family as well. As I say, my own family is an incredible family, and the support from them was just amazing. The support from my own friends, I've got a group of incredible female friends who came round, and I remember my parents came over and stayed. My brother came and stayed in the aftermath, like immediately after it happened. And my three friends came round the day after, and we found ourselves laughing. And I think some people would frown on that, but it helped me. And so having a lot of positivity around me really helped me kind of get through this and move forward quicker. And then the young people, it really helped me to think about how I could use my story and use Leo's legacy to do something positive. So I think all of, as I was saying, those little drops of serendipity. So I was looking into coaching, I was already looking into leaving teaching, and then I came across a course that was specifically for coaching teens, and it felt like the right time and the right place. So it was over a year after Leo died. So I did another year in teaching. I did the 6 months after he died on a phased return, and then I went back in the September because I just wasn't ready to kind of consider anything else, and I wasn't ready to leave and move on. But then in the April, so about a year ago, just over a year ago, I came across a course that was specifically to train to coach teens. And I was like, right, so this is what I want to do. And then on the back of that, because of this amazing network that we've built up through Leo's friends, they've helped me kind of try things out. And, I can throw ideas at them and they'll say to me, yes, I think that would work, or no, I don't think that would work. And I think if I hadn't got that network, I may be questioning whether, is this definitely what I want to do? But they've been really encouraging, and they're just like, this is brilliant. Yes, I think Leo would really approve of this. So that's helped me a lot as well. And then I've just met some amazing people. So Amber has really helped me. And I met Amber through the course that I was on to coach teens. So I don't know if you remember, Amber said her first speaking event was a conference for.
And just for anyone listening, Amber is a business coach who we can link below, who's fantastic, who is kind of how we met one another. But yeah, go ahead. So Amber used to work
Yeah.
In teaching as well. So
yes. So we had that connection, and then I signed up for Amber's coaching as well. And so I think there've been lots of moments and lots of people that seem to have popped up at the right time. I mean, even you, through Amber's coaching group, I've met you, and it's an opportunity to share my story. So I do think being open to opportunities has helped me. I've made a conscious effort not to let the grieving process shut me down. I've tried to make the grieving process part of the journey, and being open how I can use this grieving process as part of my journey, which I know some people might find strange, because I am in a community of bereaved parents, and some people have found it really, really hard to move on and find a way forward. And I completely get that. I completely understand that, because I think everybody deals with it in different ways. And I think everybody's relationship with their children is different.
I think that's what was just springing to mind for me, is that the grief is such a independent experience. And actually, if you've found a way to
Yeah.
hold that grief, interact with it in a way that feels right for you, then that is the right way, and that might look different to someone else's.
Yeah, there are other people who have used it as their motivation. I don't know if you've heard of the Three Dads Walking, but their daughters all died by suicide at university as well, and they've turned that into a mission, and they raise money through sponsorship for Papyrus, which is a youth suicide charity. And, they've appeared on TV and all sorts of things. So that's, they've made that their mission. So I think it can be a driving force. I think grief can be a real driving force for good. And also the legacy, I think making something of Leo's legacy. He was an amazing person. And I want people to know that. I want people to know how amazing he was. But he reached a point where he couldn't cope. That's not because he wasn't an amazing person. That was, it was just part of him. It was what happened. But my mission really now is to help others and kind of make talking about feelings the norm, really. It would be amazing if I can help prevent other families from going through what we're going through. But I think ultimately I'll never know. And that's probably a good thing, because just like I'll never know whether I could have done everything differently and the outcome may or may not have been the same, I suppose the work I'm doing now, I'll never actually know whether I've saved a life, but I would like to think that would be my absolute goal, is that somebody somewhere has either worked with me or heard me or, heard Leo's story, and it's helped them turn their life around. That's the big thing for me. So in a strange kind of way, I'm grateful for the journey. I'm not grateful for Leo dying. That I would change that in a heartbeat. But I'm very grateful for the journey, and I'm grateful for the people around me, that I've been able to turn this into something positive, be able to help others.
And that shines through. It really does, speaking to you, and even being here and telling your story and showing up in the work that you do, that commitment to help others completely shines through. And I wondered if you'd be happy to share a bit about what that work looks like. What is the work that you do? If anyone's listening and they're interested in getting some support, what is it that, where could you help with that?
So the core part at the moment is one-to-one with teens. So I do one-to-one coaching. My focus has been exam anxiety, lack of confidence, and low self-esteem. So I do one-off sessions, but really it needs slightly longer than that. So I have a 6-week program and a 12-week program, working one-to-one, predominantly face-to-face, but I do also work online. I've recently launched a transition program for students going from year 6 into year 7. So I shall be running that for the first time this summer, because I think transitions are really hard for students, particularly going from a little primary school into a much bigger secondary school. If I can help students start that journey with confidence, that's my aim with that program, is to give them the skills and some tools to help them through that transition and help them start secondary school with a confident mindset. And I've got in the pipeline, I'm going to be starting a parent group. That's at the moment, that's in the planning. But I think for a lot of parents, the teen years are actually quite hard. So I think for teens, the teen years can be quite hard. So that one-to-one coaching is really important. And obviously we can really support students and give them coping strategies and tools to help them cope with the challenges of teen life. But I think for parents, it can also be quite a tough time. They've gone from being like the main character in their child's life, where they tell them everything, and suddenly you've got a child who wants to be independent but hasn't yet quite got the emotional maturity to do that. So how do you balance that need to be, wanting to help and support and parent, but also letting them be a little bit more independent and helping them to learn. So I will have a Facebook group and a parent membership and hopefully a parent course in the future.
Amazing. And all of that work seems so, it's important work that you're doing. And it's really beautiful that you're seeing it from both sides and supporting parents like yourself, but also the children and the teenagers as well, and acknowledging that there are challenges for all, and we're all navigating life in different ways.
We are, and I think there is a lack of support. I think there's quite a lot of support for new parents, and I think parents at primary school, they have networks, but when students go to secondary school, that network kind of disappears a little bit. You're no longer at the school gates, and you're no longer seeing everybody day to day, to be able to have those little conversations about things that happened. And at the same time, your child is becoming more independent. So I think it is important to support both the teens and the parents. And again, that's been part of my journey. That's been part of my kind of realization as to what's important and what I want to do and what I want to make from my story, really.
And I just want to thank you for sharing your story with me and anyone listening. I really appreciate your vulnerability, and also that, I suppose, acknowledging, I think I said earlier, the importance of sharing stories like this and having the bravery to do so you can support others as well. And you think you said earlier you are a giver, and that really shows your dedication to helping other people. So yeah, I want to thank you for this conversation. I'm really humbled to have been a part of it and a small part of your journey. And I'm really excited to see where all of this support goes, and how it seems like there could be endless growth here in the way that you could support young people and also parents. And there is a question that I ask everyone who comes onto the podcast. So if you'd be happy to answer, I would love to hear if there's anything that you would say to past you standing on the edge of that defining moment.
I've thought about this because you did mention that this question was going to come up. So I'd kind of thought about this. I think my instinct would be to say, I'd say do things differently, try and do this, try and prevent it from happening. That would be my instinct. I think deep down, as I've said, I think I could have done everything differently and the outcome might still have been the same. So I think my focus would be on, you actually never know what life is going to throw at you. You never know what's around the corner. There is no way that I could have predicted this at all. There is no way it was even on my radar. And so I think the message that I would give to the me before this happened was that you're going to be okay, and you're going to get through this, and you're going to find a way to turn this into something positive.
Thank you. Yeah. And that, I suppose, just want to kind of reflect back of acknowledging that fragility of life, and the word that came up a few times as you were talking today was gratitude. So being, practicing gratitude for the things we have and the things that we cannot, also acknowledging the things that we cannot change.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think it's really important to understand that there are going to be moments in life that you have, I think there's a lot of moments in life that you have no control over. There's a saying that I hold on to, and that you cannot change how others act. You can only change how you react. And I think that's so important, that you have control over your own actions and your own reactions. We can't control what's going to happen in life. And sometimes things happen that are completely devastating and turn your world upside down. And for me, what I've learned is it's how you react to that is the defining part. It's not the event itself. It's what you do in the aftermath of that event that defines it.
Yeah, such powerful, powerful words. And I think an important lesson that we can all learn and we can all try and embed. Thank you so much again, Jane. I have, like I said, so appreciative and humbled by you choosing to come and have this conversation with me today. for anyone listening who is interested in more of the work Jane does, we will make sure that Jane is linked below and you're able to connect with her. But yeah, thanks again and goodbye.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me the space to share my story. It's been a really useful process for me. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Define. I hope this story reminded you of your own strength, your own shifts, your own becoming. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and journey on.